Christians need to understand just how destructive the King James Version and Strong's Concordance, and they're related, how destructive they really are. My name's Thorsten Moritz. I happen to be a biblical scholar. Now, there's no problem with being an amateur. In most areas of life, every human being is an amateur. But we've got to know our limits. It is kind of heartbreaking when you watch people feel so strongly about what they believe, are so insecure that they attack any scholar just for being a scholar, and then they use amateurish tools to try and make their point, and then the many who may look in and listen to that conversation don't know what to do with that. I will first give you some context to do with the King James Version and Strong's Concordance, and then I will tell you what makes them so very destructive. My main beef with the King James Version isn't even that it's linguistically so inferior, which it certainly is. It uses something called formal equivalence, and there is no language on earth that functions like that. But my main issue is a different one. In those days, in the early 1600s, the King of England was also the head of the church, and the bishops were considered the king's bishops. And consequently, when the king commissioned a new translation, he mandated that translation would reflect that way of being church that they had at the time, that was the major political instrument for controlling the people. The even bigger translation principle than formal equivalence was the king's mandate that the picture of the church resulting from the new translation had to reflect like a mirror the church as it existed in his day. It was a big problem for the king and the bishops and the other church leaders that the New Testament in Greek, the original New Testament, had no room for church offices like the ones they were holding as appointed by the king. What to do? Well, you have to translate in such a way that that problem is fixed. And now you end up with bishops, for instance. The Greek word episkopos, that in Greek in the first century never meant bishop, now means bishop. When if Ephesians 4 mentions pastor as one gift, not office, among many. Suddenly, that gift gets transformed into an office and gets elevated above the other, so now you have a pastor. When Jesus announces to the world that through him the kingdom of God was materializing at the time, that is a problem on two fronts, right? Because the king actually lived in the 1600s, the king who commissioned that translation, so you want to have the kingdom at that time, not in the first century. And secondly, announcing, that's not good enough. We need to turn that into preaching. So every time the New Testament talks about announcing the kingdom of God, many of our translations end up telling us that the kingdom of God is being preached. And preaching is something that those pastors do. How convenient. There are people in the comments who keep telling me the whole time, I see it black and white, it's right there. Are you dumb? Can't you see it? Go back to your milk and cookies. And when these changes couldn't fully be accomplished by quote-unquote translation, you add to that a study Bible that will explain to you what the text means. And what it really means is not what it meant at the time. It means what the church authorities were happy with in the early 1600s. Does it surprise you that members of the original translation committee in the 1600s were promised higher positions in the church hierarchy? Does it surprise you that the bishops wanted to and had to and insisted on approving every aspect of the translation? Does it